Madan Sabnavis now joining us, economist at the Bank of Baroda. Madan, just help us set, according to you, we've seen the economic survey, talk of growth, got to keep that growth going. What would be your key expectations from the budget?
So actually, when we are trying to formulate any kind of expectations in a budget, to keep two things in mind. One is that the budget is actually an income expenditure account of the government of India. And there are lots of policies which are announced outside the budget. So therefore, we need to temper our expectations in terms of policies. Because what we really see is almost every sector, every individual would like to have policies in a budget. But this is not really the forum for policy formulation. It happens outside the budget also. Second is that the government since 2020, even when we had the most challenging times, has actually shown its commitment towards fiscal prudence in the sense that we did not spend what other countries did. And lots of critics were critical about that particular fact. But we know very well that the government is going to go along the fiscal prudence path, which can be defined as saying that we need to get to the 4.5% fiscal deficit ratio by 2025-26. So if we keep these two things in mind, what are kind of expectations we could have? See, I would tend to believe that around 80% of the overall size of the budget, so if we go by last year, we had around 40 lakh crores of outlay. Around 80% of it is virtually committed. So therefore, there's nothing much that you can do about it. So you're left with around 25% of the budget, which has to go for capital expenditure, maybe for so-called freebies, which are being given in the form of cash transfers, so on and so forth. So I think the major thing what we should look out for is how perceptions are really managed in the budget. So this budget is all going to be about perception management, because with the elections coming up, there are expectations that there will be certain things populist. But to my mind, as long as we're along the fiscal path, nothing can really be populist. It'll be a case of reallocating expenditures from some schemes, cutting down on certain things, increasing somewhere else. Like, for example, the free food scheme has actually been done away with. Instead, we have the old PDS, which is going at a zero price for the consumer. So I think there would be these kind of reallocations which would take place. There could be some kind of tinkering which could take place on the income tax front, because I think the salaried class has not gotten anything for the last 7-8 years. There could be some kind of exemptions which could be widened in the sense that some of the, say, for example, the savings schemes which we have under Section 80C could be widened, because today we have a problem of consumption, we have a problem of savings, we have a problem of investment. So I think the budget will have to do a little bit on all these counts to make sure that things are moving in the right direction. So maybe the capex will be increased, but let's not expect that capital expenditure of the government is going to help to bring about the accelerated growth which the economic survey is talking about. Because finally, it's all in the hands of the private sector. The private sector so far has not responded in the manner which was desired. You lowered the tax rate in 2019. It did not really lead to higher investment. So I think since governments don't run on the basis of earning a profit for the shareholder, whereas companies do, so companies invest only when there is demand. There is demand when there is consumption. There is consumption when there is income. There is income when there are more jobs created. So I think that was the problem which we had even before the pandemic struck. So that's how I would be very much modest in terms of my expectations of my budget, more of perception management.
All right, Madan, just stay on with us. Sunil Munjal now joining us, and let me get his sense of it. Sunil, bet on growth, bet on the ability to be really, keep that economy ticking. And once you do that, everything sorts itself out, whether it's fiscal deficit or poverty or everything else. Is that what you're expecting? Another big bet on growth this time, or conservative budget, or a budget that's going to keep in mind that there are elections 1 year from now?
So thank you, Vikram. First, I don't know who the previous speaker was, but he stole all my lines. This is what I was going to say to you myself. But if I take a 32,000
well, that's okay. At least there's a consensus then, Sunil, between you. That was Madan Sabnavis from the Bank of Baroda, Chief Economist. There seems to be consensus then between the two of you.
Yes. So I think one thing the government has demonstrated is its ability not to get tempted by excessive freebies before a before an election year budget. So that's one thing they have demonstrated. So I expect the budget to continue down the same path, pushing for growth, at the same time moderating where they can to bring the fist in control, because that is one of our challenges right now. So the FM has a twin task ahead of her right now. On the one hand, to keep growth going at the same time, try and see how do you address the sectors which have lagged completely. This recovery post-COVID is looking very rosy, but reality is these are average numbers which are showing up very well. If you look at specific sectorally, individual verticals, we do have a number of them which are lagging behind very badly right now, and also causing job losses. The social fallout of that can be quite severe and significant in India, which is young, and India, which is impatient. So I think she has to work on both ends at this time.
All right. Mr. Munjal, just hold that thought. Jim Rogers is with us, and we're trying to get a bit of an international perspective of what global investors are looking at. There are some sectors, Mr. Rogers, as Mr. Munjal was saying right now, which are not doing too well. But one of the big stories, I think, of the last few years has been this major infrastructure drive that we've been seeing, so that India comes to at par with the rest of the world when it comes to roads or ports or logistics in general. Is that one of the things that is catching your attention here in India?
Well, everybody needs infrastructure, including India, and everybody needs healthcare, including India, and education, including India. But people do need sound currencies and sound balance sheets. And in my view, the thing that strikes me the most is, look, I know it's an election. I know an election coming up, but it strikes me that India is doing nothing as far as balancing the budget and reducing the debt. That's the main thing I notice as an international investor. But I know there's an election. I know that happens everywhere.
All right. Sunil Munjal, so looking at the highlight aspects that you would like to see in the budget, infrastructure, as I was saying, has been a success story. You may well see a lot more spending on that. There's the traditional conversation about let's allocate money to education and health. Healthcare allocation has gone up, but still lower than what happens in the rest of the world. And then, of course, there would be some of the schemes and the so-called populist measures that are important. We'll come to where she's going to get the money, but in spending, these are some of the areas where she will have to figure out where is she going to prioritize.
Agriculture and rural infrastructure to this as well, Vikram. And if you can figure out a way to look at the sectors which have a massive knock-on effect, there's a big multiplier to areas like real estate, house constructing homes. It is a social good, plus it has 154 industries directly connected to this sector itself. So similarly, I think she will look at sectors which have a higher multiplier effect to figure out a way to support those a little bit more. And you're right about infrastructure. I think that's been one of India's success stories over the last few years. And we certainly need to keep pushing that. And the expectation is this year, we should also be able to start crowding in some private sector investment, because that has clearly been lagging over the last few years. The opportunity on health is great, but we have brought, as you said, our spend up to 2.1%. We would, of course, like to see it higher, but it is certainly higher than it used to be.